The news was received by every corner of the globe in just a matter of a few hours. However, the world on the other hand reacted completely differently to the information, especially after the American government held a press conference a few hours after the one carried out by Eden's Ministry of Defense, EMOD. But during this press conference, they brought out a completely different narrative from what the EMOD had stated about the ongoing war. The revelation from the American government's side came with imagery evidence, among which included the shocking explosion images that were captured by their space-based infrared system, SBIRS, constellation. The image clearly showed the ocean water rising very high amidst a few boats that were destroyed and only had a few pieces floating together, with a massive plum of water rising for a radius of 10 kilometers, which was its impact zone. The water turned foamy after being disturbed by shockwaves from the explosion and was caught by the sensors and is now shown as evidence. In fact, people were completely taken aback by such a horrific event that had occurred just a few hours ago, and the country that did this did not even consider what might happen after they massacred the entire fleet that had breached their maritime sovereignty and continued acting as if the war had only started. At Curiosol, whoa, just caught up on the EMOD's press conference about the ongoing war. Their narrative made them look weak, but now the American government comes in with a completely different story, #War Saga #Dual Narratives. At History Buff 101. This is getting wild. The American government's imagery evidence is too just shocking. That explosion pic from their SBIRS is horrifying, yet it looked awesome. #War Saga #Explosive Revelations. At News Junkie 23, can't wrap my head around it. Why does Eden's narrative imply that the fight is going to be very difficult for them if they want to come out victorious, but at the same time, America's narrative shows that they have completely dragged and massacred the Esperians, ending the entire thing in a matter of a few minutes? Who do we believe? #War Saga #Conflicting Reports. At TechGeek 99. The technology doesn't lie, the SBIRS evidence is compelling, but who's to confirm that it wasn't tampered with? We need a real report. Conspiracy theories in 3, 2, 1. #War Saga #TechTruth. At Problem Maker, but from where the heck did they even get their hands on such a powerful explosive, and how were they even able to use it without the other side doing absolutely nothing to avoid it? #something is hidden here #conspiracy #inside job. At Political Insight, geopolitics at play, EMOD and America trying to shape the narrative in their favor. We need unbiased reporting and fact-checking. #War Saga #geopolitical games. At Defense Expert 22. Let's not forget the tragedy. The casualties in the ocean battle can't be ignored. Condolences to the families affected. #War Saga #remember the fallen. At Hopeful Mindset, amidst the chaos, let's hope for better days ahead. Humanity must find a way to resolve conflicts peacefully. #War Saga #hope for peace. At Analytical Eyes, the power of perspective, EMOD and America's narratives show how information can be twisted to their liking. Critical thinking is crucial in times like these. #War Saga #perspective matters. At The Curious Suit 69, by the way, where the fuck is Esperia's Department of Defense? We need some fucking answers. They remain quiet throughout all of this? Are they embarrassed for the beating they received? #War Saga where the fuck is Esperia #Esperia? I need answers. Interestingly, Esperia had remained silent despite them being the ones who had suffered heavy casualties of their soldiers and were humiliated, while the other side had already made their announcement. As the public pressure continued to increase, the silence could only last for a few hours before the news about Esperia arranging a press conference in the afternoon of the same day. After all, they were pressured by the public to give an explanation of what the heck had happened, and with the cries of the families of the soldiers that had been sent to the border during the period, only escalated the tensions. People were waiting for the press conference with anxiousness, curious as to what explanation Esperia was going to provide about the devastating events. Esperia Ministry of Defense press conference. Inside the room filled with hundreds of reporters from both local and international media, all were eager to get this news to the curious observers who wanted to get as much information as possible about the ongoing situation. People were curious whether it was just a skirmish that would end as such, or will it escalate into a full-blown war, with some secretly hoping for the latter to happen. A handsome-looking man, donned in a full ceremonial military uniform, walked into the room, carrying a hard folder in his hands. He confidently walked to the podium before putting the folder on it. Raising his head, he looked at the flashing cameras and reporters in the room to address them in a calm and slow manner. Ladies and gentlemen, the little amount of whispers and talks came to a halt as he continued. Thank you for joining us today as we address the recent events involving Hesperia and Eden. It is with a heavy heart that I stand before you to shed light on the unfortunate incidents that occurred last night. He paused for a moment, allowing the people to prepare themselves for the gravity of what he was going to say next. After a short moment of pause, he continued, last night, our fleet was engaged in a routine navigation exercise, training for a situation where we use other means of navigation apart from just our GPS navigation system. Due to some uncalculated errors occurring during the exercise, our fleet inadvertently veered into Eden's waters without any malicious intent. When that happened, Eden's forces, without any prior warning, launched an aggressive attack on our fleet using a bomb that resulted in the loss of numerous brave soldiers and the capture of the remaining members. We deeply mourn for the loss of our comrades and are doing everything in our power to secure the safe return of those captured. It is crucial to note that there was no prior warning from Eden and we were taken by surprise when we were suddenly faced with an attack without any provocation. He let out a sigh, a look of worry flashing on his face. He then continued. Furthermore, Eden's aggression didn't stop right at the sea as they simultaneously initiated a skirmish on the land border. This clearly indicates that this was not just a simple reaction to us entering their water, but a deliberately planned operation from their side, so that they could inflict damage upon us, and us entering their waters was nothing but a mere justification they could use for what they had done to us. Their actions caught our forces off guard, leaving them with little to no chance to defend themselves. This attack resulted in severe casualties and a humiliating arrest of all the surviving members of our forces situated on the base. The man said as he seemed to be grinding his teeth in anger. Seeing this, many of the reporters couldn't help but start to believe that it was indeed true. In the room where the Hesperian government was providing information as to what had happened, most of the reporters in the conference couldn't help but feel sorry for Hesperia after hearing the truth. Meanwhile, the guy who had been informing them about the events from last night looked at the reporters with conviction after a deep moment of pause. As a nation committed to peace and cooperation, we never intended, nor did we seek for any confrontation with our neighbor, Eden. The events that unfolded were truly regrettable and tragic. We might never be able to forget what they had done to us. However, Hesperia doesn't intend to use vengeance, rather we seek to resolve the conflicts through peaceful means, and we extend our hand in dialogue to Eden. We call for a cessation of hostilities and hope that together, we can find a diplomatic solution to prevent further bloodshed and foster a peaceful coexistence for the citizens of our nations. However, let me be clear, in the face of this unprovoked aggression and the great loss of our brave soldiers, Hesperia stands united and resolute. We will defend our sovereignty and protect our citizens from any threat with unwavering determination, no matter the cost. The sudden change in the tone and words caused almost everyone in the room to look at each other. Nonetheless, they still continued to hear him. In the upcoming weeks, we will work to get our captured soldiers back and seek the absolute necessary compensation to our martyred soldiers. We hope Eden cooperates with us in this regard and avoids any further escalation of the situation, as that might lead to a bite back. The man then put a blank look on his face as he said, "Rest assured, this decision to negotiate is not due to the lack of our capability for retaliation, rather it is an act of mercy to prevent any further loss of life, should we choose to retaliate in a similar way. Should our negotiations with them fail, we have the responsibility to remind them. Hesperia's military might remain unmatched, our soldiers are courageous and skilled, and we also have the unwavering support of our citizens. With that said, we shall retain the right to declare war on them in case the negotiation with them ends unfavorably. We shall not be deterred and we shall not falter. Together, we will overcome this adversity and emerge victorious in revenging our fallen, no matter the price. God bless Hesperia." With those words, he concluded the press conference without taking any questions from the reporters, despite having their hands raised the moment he finished, trying to point out the inconsistency in some of the things he had said. They really went with that approach of trying to make us look like the instigators. How is the reaction online? Aaron asked, maintaining a smile on his face, not showing any negative reaction to what was said at Esperia's press conference. The Morgans have gotten into high gear as they are trying to shape the world's perception of the event. They are using their massive media control to portray us as the aggressors. They are trying to shape public opinion and make it seem as if we were the ones who started this, as they saw no chance of winning if we were to be fighting fairly, thus chose this surprise, coordinated attack as a means to attack to the strong-arm themselves into ending the stand-up we had on our border, Nova reported back, answering Aaron's question. Should I start countering their attempts at shaping public opinion? She asked about his preferred choice of action. No, just make sure such rhetoric doesn't appear inside Eden, Aaron answered. By the way, how long is their preparation going to take before they are able to declare war on us? He asked, as he was sure that they didn't have any plans of not declaring war on us and merely used it up as an excuse to buy themselves some time before they could return back more prepared. The minimum is a month, but it won't exceed 2 months. They will likely be preparing themselves on ways to counter measures on what they perceived as our ability to jam their outdated communication tech. So, most of their upgrades will be in that direction. Also, since they are sure that they can damage our communication infrastructure by cyber attacks, we can expect more of them to happen in the next fight, Nova reported back. Should I allow them to do the damage, or is the current damage enough? She asked, wanting to know his approach on the cyber battlefield. Nah, they did enough damage the first time to give us justification to overhaul all of the government's communication networks, Aaron answered, showing that this was going to be the first and the last time he allowed a cyber attack to be targeted at important things in the country. Also, did the materials Felix bought arrive yet? He asked, remembering the reason this war had to be taken care of by only a few members of ESF and some helicopters. Yes, they have arrived at the port and 46% of it has already been delivered. As for the rest, they will continue to arrive by Saturday evening, Nova reported back. Good, we need to make it extremely clear that we are not to be messed with, Aaron said in a serious tone before he was interrupted by his phone's ring. When he took a look at the caller, he saw that it was Alexander, the president of Eden. Hello, Mr. President, Aaron said, playfully adding the title jokingly. Hello, I called to ask if you have seen the press conference which Esperia just did? Alexander asked respectfully, just like always, maintaining his respect for Aaron. Yes, I watched it while it occurred and I must say, they are making quite bold claims, Aaron answered. Are we capable of handling their war declaration, or are you planning to return their captured soldiers and compensate for their loss? Alexander asked in a tone which showed that he didn't hope this to happen, since that would destroy the country's morale. You don't have to worry about that. We know for sure that no matter what we do, they don't plan for anything to end peacefully either way. They plan to declare war on us and we are completely capable of winning it. We have about 40,000 soldiers ending their training by the end of this week. That would make it impossible for Esperia to come victorious in any fight we have with them, Aaron answered, reassuring his friend. Really? Alexander exclaimed in surprise, knowing that although Aaron would joke sometimes with him, his jokes would always be backed up with action if push comes to shove. Yes, as for how, John will be visiting you soon to brief you on everything. So, don't worry about such matters and continue to encourage the citizens to join their effort in strengthening the country, both in construction and military, Aaron said. Also, how do you plan to refute their accusation of us attacking them without any warnings? Alexander asked. Our spokesperson will be holding a press conference soon, coming up with evidence showing that we did warn them and even give them enough time to change course. When they didn't, we took necessary actions to protect our territory on both the sea and land by firing at them for trespassing, Aaron answered and shortly added. More details will be sent to you in a few minutes by the Minister of Defense, dumping all the responsibility to John, who was both the general and the Minister of Defense of the country, with no term limit for his position and could only be removed or replaced by Aaron's approval. Ooh, that's good then, Alexander said after hearing his response, and continued having conversations with him on different topics which were not in the least related to the ongoing war. Since Aaron had promised to solve this issue, he completely trusted him and was awaiting for John's meeting to know of the details. A few hours after Esperia's press conference concluded, Eden held a press conference of its own too. Although Eren had told Nova to not intervene except for Eden, he had meant in cyberspace, leaving Alexander free to do whatever he, John and Athena could come up during their meeting. This time, however, unlike the last press conferences of the two nations, the only difference here being the fact that it was Alexander, the president of Eden, who would be speaking and not some representative of the government. Usually, the press conference in the presidential palace would have been carried out inside a press room which was large enough to accommodate more than 50 reporters along with their recording equipments. However, due to the large influx of reporters today, their equipments were restricted from entry, allowing only the reporter themselves to enter the conference. As for the footage of the press conference, everything regarding that would be provided to all the channels who requested it, since it was being recorded by the latest equipment owned by the government bought for their commercial use. Alexander, wearing very stylish-looking glasses, walked into the room while accompanied behind by John, the general of Ares, who was closely followed by their spokespersons from the two offices and a few high-level members of the government trailing behind them as they immediately spread, standing in a straight line behind the podium which at the moment carried Eden's president's emblem, meaning that it would be the president who will be addressing the conference first. As he stepped onto the podium, Alexander adjusted his glasses and turned his gaze to the more than 50 reporters in the room who had quieted themselves to let him start his announcement as early as possible. With a slight smile on his face, he started addressing his speech to all of them. "Good evening, everyone." At the start of his speech, he simply greeted and then continued. "First, I would like to apologize for such an abrupt press conference, but our Enema fellows on the other side of the border did something that required us to make this abrupt conference to make sure that no more misconceptions are spread among everyone and turn us into the bad guys. So, this press conference is going to be spending most of the time refuting what they had claimed during their press conference." He looked around at the people and added, "Of course, with the valid proofs." He then paused for a moment while the screen beside him was powered on and started showing CCTV footage. The footage played on the screen behind showed that it was captured at night, and instead of a color footage, the footage was infrared, albeit a pretty high-quality one. For the first few seconds of the footage, nothing seemed to happen as the screen displayed the uneventful environment where the camera was recording. However, the reporters and watchers of the press conference knew exactly what this footage was for. On the top left corner of the screen it displayed a date of today, immediately after midnight, indicating that it had something to do with the war. After a few seconds of continuous nothingness, the screen suddenly turned white, followed by the shake of the video before it returned to normal, but this time it showed a very different environment. The place which the CCTV had been recording had been completely altered, leaving behind a massive crater, clearly indicating that it has been struck by an artillery shell. The footage was followed by the shaking a few more times at indifferent intervals before the video file came to a conclusion, returning the screen to black before it was followed by Alexander, who resumed his speaking. "What you saw was the footage captured from one of our frontline bases located on the border that was the first to be hit by the artillery shells just a few minutes after midnight, and that is not all. This is just the evidence of the attack they started on the land border. As for what took place on the water, you can listen to that yourselves." After he said that, what immediately followed was the appearance of sound waves which started displaying on the screen, indicating that it was going to be an audio evidence instead of a video one. "Attention all Esperia Navy vessels, this is a warning announcement from Eden's Navy. We have detected your entry into Eden's territorial waters, and we demand an immediate explanation for your presence in our sovereign waters. We are closely monitoring your movements, and any provocative or hostile actions will be met with a firm and decisive response. In the interest of de-escalation and maintaining regional peace, we urge you to identify yourselves and your purpose for being here." The audio started with the full warning that Athena had issued to Esperia's fleet which had trespassed into their waters. "This is Esperia's fleet commander. We are here under the order of the commander-in-chief, the president of Esperia, in retaliation to you firing." It was followed by the response of the Esperia's fleet commander, which revealed how disrespectful they were despite being the one trespassing in the waters of another country. "If you don't turn around within 30 seconds, you will regret having said those words." Following the response which people knew very well the results of, the reporters at the moment had goosebumps knowing how Eden had warned the other side only once, and when the other side disrespected them, They even gave them 30 seconds to change course or promised to send them an ordinance, which might have to be the last thing they heard while still being in one piece. Big words used by weak people, but this will also be our last warning, as soon as th. The Esperian fleet's response was followed by what they considered as their own version of threat. When the 30 seconds are over, fire at them. This made people think this was weirdly similar to a children's fight, which continuously escalated as the other side doubled down on their threats. But all of their thoughts came to an end when the screen that had been showing the audio wave footage turned on and displayed a moving camera in night mode while the Esperian fleet was closing near the Eden's border and their navy flag getting closer and closer. The reporters immediately realized that this was the fucking missile, a response of Eden's after the given 30 seconds were over. Right now there was a complete silence in the press conference that was held by Eden as the reporters stared at the huge screen before them with some fear and shock. Many of them also seemed to have been deeply taken aback as their faces looked pale. In a matter of a few seconds, the fleet went from being seen from afar to the footage suddenly cutting out. The screen now started displaying a new angle of the war theater as it was captured on a helicopter camera, recording what happened. The massive waterspout mushroom which was displayed was accompanied by the high-speed shockwave that disrupted the water as it continued to spread. The camera that was recording the situation started shaking before stabilizing itself for a short moment, silencing the entire room despite having seen the same images that were released by the American government, and they could imagine the size of that devastating explosion and whatnot. However, this time they were seeing it happen frame by frame, observing a few ships that were raised 50 meters high before breaking in two as they fell down, disappearing deep into the water that slapped the other surviving ships, turning them upside down, and all the horror one could imagine about the ocean fury happened all at once. When they thought that there were people who were alive inside those ships, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies, both the reporters and the people who were watching the video on the other side of the screen. As the footage came to a conclusion, the screen returned to its default black while Alexander continued his speech. Among many evidences that we could bring to refute Esperia's claims, there was also something that every citizen of our country suffered. Esperia started by cyber attacks 4 days before they even made their moves past the border. Our citizens can bear witness to it since most of the people had their internet slowed down to almost a halt while we had most of our government websites shut down from their DDoS attacks. Which now, thanks to them for revealing the weaknesses on our side, we have now reached an agreement with Connect to revamp the entire country's internet infrastructure along with the government systems, which would start immediately from next week. He paused for a moment as the expression on his face got a little darker before he continued with his speech. Despite all of these evidences, the other side has the audacity to accuse us of being the ones who started the fight, portraying us as the bad guys and even sending subtle threats of declaring war on us. His way of speech changed very quickly, going from his calm demeanor to an obvious anger as he emphasized on his ending sentence while gritting his teeth. Bam! He startled the reporters by hitting the podium where papers would usually be placed. However, at the moment, there were none of them. His hand indicated that he was angered by the situation as he said, "Did they think that such petty threats will make us return their captured soldiers without taking compensation for the damage they inflicted on our infrastructures, just because they threaten us with a declaration of war? If that is what they are relying on, they can continue dreaming. Thank you for your time," he said, immediately leaving the podium and the room as he rubbed the sweat that had accumulated in his hands due to his anger. His place was immediately taken by John, who immediately commenced his speech as that was what he was advised to do by Athena, who was the mastermind behind all of the things that happened during the press conference. John's speech was a little bit tame, carrying with it the confidence and dignity of a general compared to what the people now thought as an emotional president who loved his country, giving its people more assurance on his capability of keeping the country safe. His speech had nothing to do about more threats or similar things, but he was just talking about the conditions of the prisoners, informing them that they were safe and were being treated according to the international treaties, facing no torture or such things, assuring their family members in the other country. At the same time, he followed by giving the conditions for the release of the captured soldiers to Esperia, starting the first round of negotiation publicly by stating their demands, which were not too outreaching, except for one which they wanted the whole island that they shared the land border with Esperia to be handed off to them, effectively turning Eden and Esperia into nations having only water borders with each other. Many people saw this as an extreme overreach. Some people believed that these were just the initial conditions. Eden was open to negotiations. However, John's last statement threw all of such notions out of the window as he firmly stated, all the conditions stated above are non-negotiable and must be accepted by Hesperia before we move forward with the prisoners of war returning to their families. This is what is deemed as enough compensation for their abrupt action of conspiring to attack a nation without any reasoning behind it. Following by saying a few more words, John also left the press conference, leaving the task of concluding the press conference into the hands of the spokespersons who had observed as the two people before them broke every public speech rule for government officials in existence as if they were mere suggestions. This now left them with the task of not antagonizing Hesperia and the rest of the world any more than what they already had. However, the bullet had already left the chamber and the reaction to the press conference was massive as the explosion footage and the radio communication continued circulating in social media, scaring the shit out of some people and incurring the curiosity of others who wondered which bomb in existence could carry such a heavy punch and could even be delivered with a booster and was on sale for Eden to buy, dismissing the idea that it was custom-made completely away from their minds. This new piece of news, which included Eden's press meeting stating the truth and their conditions for sending back the soldiers of Hesperia, was immediately fanned by the news agencies that continuously kept releasing article after article with headlines that attracted people's attention to the situation even more. At breaking news alert, explosive audio evidence surfaces in the Eden-Hesperia conflict. Watch the shocking footage of the missile attack on the Hesperian fleet. Tensions escalate as Eden demands full control of the shared island border. #breaking news #world conflict. At Analytical Insight. Eden's bold move demands complete control of the island border. But will Hesperia accept these non-negotiable terms? The footage of the attack leaves us horrified. Where does this conflict go from here? #geopolitics #war on water. At Military Insider. That missile strike was next level. The power and precision displayed by it is unparalleled. Speculations arise on the weapon's origin and its potential suppliers. Questions abound. #advanced military tech #warfare evolution. At CNN News. Strong words from Eden's president, Alexander. Will Hesperia yield to their demands? Negotiations seem tense, and world leaders are closely watching. #international relations #diplomacy in crisis. At Curious Citizen. What kind of missile caused such a massive explosion? This raises concerns about the accessibility of such powerful weapons. The world needs stricter arms control regulations, #arms proliferation #global security. Thanks to this, every reader of this topic found themselves thinking that they were experts in the citation and started laying out their ideas and assuming as to how the situation would be going to follow from now on, some even coming up with good assumptions. Some completely got deviated and entered the realm of science fiction. At History Buff 101. Tensions between nations are nothing new. Let's take a deep breath and reflect on historical conflicts that eventually led to peaceful resolutions. Will Eden and Hesperia find their own Cold War copyright tent? #lessons from history #hope for peace. At Crazy Conspiracies. What if this whole thing is just a distraction from an even bigger conspiracy? Alien invasion. Anyone? Share your wildest theories and let's keep an open mind. #beyond the surface #truth unveiled. And among many of the discussions, one of them attracted a little bit more attention as it seemed that Twitter was very good at sowing conflicts between people with different ideas about the situation, leading to heated arguments about the situation. At War or Peace Expert. The Eden-Hesperia conflict got me thinking. Diplomacy will win the day. Both sides need to sit down, talk it out, and find common ground. No need for war when dialogue can lead to peace. #diplomacy first #war or peace. At Mighty Warrior. You're kidding, right? War is inevitable. Eden already showed their strength in this small-scale fight. Hesperia is clearly no match for them. Victory is on the horizon. #unstoppable Eden #war incoming. At War or Peace Expert. Oh, please. A small skirmish doesn't decide the outcome. Hesperia may regroup and retaliate. It's crucial to prevent further violence and aim for a peaceful coexistence. #opt for peace #war not the answer. At Mighty Warrior. Wishful thinking. Eden had indeed gotten the upper hand and they wouldn't back down. Hesperia will crumble under the pressure. Mark my words, I choose strength and power. Eden has got the edge and that's the reality. Hesperia better watch out. Hashtag Eden supremacy. Hashtag warriors rise. At War or Peace Expert. War is not a game. Innocent lives are at stake here. Let's put our efforts into de-escalation and finding common ground for peace. Hashtag protect lives. Hashtag war not the answer. While most of the online netizens were discussing the events that had occurred one after another, but at the same time, inside the Earth 2.0, soldiers could be seen engaged in a war against a country that possessed more advanced technology compared to them, and they were having their asses handed to them by their enemies. They had been here for more than 75 days, and during this period, other than training, they had faced nothing but war, briefing about their mistakes before they were returned back to war, again and again, to get their asses handed once more before they were shown their mistakes once again in a continuous loop, with their enemies also continuously getting stronger just like them. However, thanks to their mistakes being shown and being returned immediately with that fresh knowledge to the fight, the lessons were etched deep into their brains, never to be forgotten again. They were receiving first-hand experience in all situations, like how to fight as a small group, as a medium-sized group, to fight as a massive group against a small group of enemies, to medium, to a massive group of enemies, getting experience in every aspect of war. On the first day they entered the simulation, they were asked to choose which branch they wanted to be specialized in and be a part of. After the selection, they were assimilated with the knowledge of that specific field, making them a super expert in that particular field while also receiving combat training with it, no matter what field they choose, even if they had opted to be a military spokesperson. Following that, they were sent to a massive military school where they practiced the knowledge they were assimilated with, to ensure nothing had gone wrong during the process. Soon after, they were immediately attacked by an enemy nation in a surprising assault, serving as the start of their test, being graded based on every action they took from that point until the last day of graduation. The final results would decide what position one would be assigned on the graduation day, meaning that one who was just a new soldier after entering the simulation could excel if they did very well and received high marks from Athena, starting their military career by becoming a commander right away. With the soldiers now informed about the benefits of earning higher points, they started working harder than when Athena had forced them. Forcing someone to do something without an endgame was difficult, but when they learned that there are benefits in having higher points than others, this boosted their motivation to strive harder than their friends, and through that camaraderie, a healthy competition started between the soldiers as they strived to gain higher marks so that they could start their lives with a high level in the military, knowing that they couldn't resign with the substantial amount of investments that was being spent on them. A massive military with all of its soldiers having their bodies genetically enhanced and having received first-hand experience was thus born. The existence of this army remained as a well-kept secret, with only a few handful of people being aware of it. This was an army that was capable of terrorizing the planet or beyond and was now taking its first step towards its formidable future. Eden's press conference did nothing other than completely disrupt many of the Morgans' plans, forcing them to spend several hours which were spent on meetings, trying to come up with new strategies to make sure they were able to achieve the desired outcome. They didn't have an option of backing down, since that would mean two things that they couldn't swallow no matter what. First, their pride would be hurt greatly if they were to lose to a country which they considered primitive, especially after having several government institutions acting as their helpers. Second, the amount of investments they had made in Eden, even putting their other developing projects on hold so that they could direct the use of their technology department to hack the shit out of Eden's government infrastructure to divert their attention, giving Hesperia the opportunity to kick their asses. Unfortunately, their efforts backfired, making them suffer a significant defeat as if the other side had already expected of their plan, leading them to look for a suspect within their own ranks. Another reason they couldn't back out no matter what was so you are saying that it might be the Rothschilds who tipped them from behind and gave the bomb after buying it by using their contacts? George grumbled after hearing the report from the representative. Right now, there were just 3 people inside his father's workroom: George himself, his father, and the representative who had been in Hesperia a day ago. Yes, we also suspect that their cooperation goes even further than simply that. Rena, the heir candidate, after her visit to Israel had personally visited Eden secretly, answered the representative, who had returned to America to report on what was happening firsthand, not trusting any communication infrastructure of Esperia. After a brief pause, he continued with his briefing. It is speculated that she had been carrying a cargo containing something radioactive, based on its shielding, which was not present with her during her return to America. By the way, how did you know about her visit, when we failed to track her during her visit? Asked George, curious about the validity of the intel. I accidentally stumbled upon her image among the intel files which were provided to me by Esperia. They were collected by one of Esperia's spies in Eden. At that moment this one had been observing the people going in and out of the presidential palace, and when his attention was attracted to a convoy that was entering the presidential palace without being searched at the door, the spy tagged it, informing his fellow spies in the country to keep an eye on it. With some trouble, they were able to manage to capture one of her pictures while she had got off to board a boat that was heading to the island. The representative took a pause, trying to see if the two in front of him had any thoughts. After hearing no reply, he continued while asking, what can they even do with radioactive materials in that underdeveloped? However, George stopped him mid-sentence as he remembered something about Eden that had created quite the buzz a few months ago. The brown clouds, George exclaimed, similar to a scientist who had experienced a eureka moment before he continued, saying, they must be doing something with what the cargo she had brought to them during her visit. He muttered as his mind simply connected the dots after receiving the new information. Yes, this is also what we suspect it to be as well, since Esperia's spies in Eden have failed to gain access to that island too. Everyone getting closer to it, even the port that has boats heading to the island, will need heavy credentials. There is also a report that last week, more than 40,000 soldiers were sent there to what we suspect being the expedite of the construction of whatever they are building there, answered the representative. What sort of construction would need so many people, and most importantly, with all of them being soldiers, to expedite it? In order to keep the project a secret? Are they doing something like the Manhattan Project? Asked Jerogay, being the one who asked the question while his father remained quiet, listening to the answers as the representative provided them. You are not too far from our speculations. We suspect it to be an enrichment facility, but everything about that island is nothing but pure speculation. We don't have any or even a few concrete rumors about what might really be going on at that piece of land, much less any information to base our assumptions on what they might be doing there, but it should be important enough for them to warrant for sending their heir candidate there secretly, with minimum security to avoid attracting any attention, answered the representative while explaining. Look like the Rothschilds are already busy doing some preparations for round 2, and it has to do something or the other with that island, Aubrey chimed in, voicing his opinion for the first time throughout this entire meeting, before he shortly ordered, tell Kasim to contact the Secretary of Defense and have him provide us the intel of what the fuck is happening under those clouds by the end of this week. His words clearly indicated that he had come to a decision based on the back and forth of words that had taken place between his favorite son and the representative. Sir, Kasim is still receiving his punishment for delaying our attack on the Rothschilds. Does this mean that he has been forgiven and can return to duty? Inquired the representative in a tone that had a hint of jealousy within, subtle enough for George to not pick it up but obvious enough for Aubrey to understand what the man was implying. No, this will act as Kasim's last chance to redeem himself. If not, he will really hope that he had never known us before, answered Aubrey, acting as if he didn't see the man's intention, since he didn't care at all about the rivalry amongst the servants as long as they accomplished the tasks given handed over to them, and if this increase in competition among them ended up hurting their capabilities of accomplishing the tasks given to them, he would just get rid of them and their replacements will be more than willing to do it in their stead. I will inform him, sir, the representative answered, portraying a respectful posture while waiting to see if there were any other instructions from him. Aubrey on the other hand ignored him and turned to his son before asking, do you think that the Esperians can win in a rematch against Eden's army if we were to provide a similar support compared to the last time? George confidently replied, they would have no chance at all if the Rothschilds are really using that country as a ground base for whatever attack they are planning. Then they must have done a massive amount of investment in the country's security. Which is rather surprising since we didn't have any indication of anything as such happening at all. Meaning that they are taking whatever is happening there very seriously. Good, so what do you think we should do? Give up on them or should we support them even more? Aubrey asked, like always, testing his son even more after being satisfied by his response. I think it is time we send our fighting forces to stretch their muscles since Afghanistan is not making them stretch themselves very well due to the US Army dealing with the insurgent groups by bombing the shit out of them, Aubrey suggested, immediately eliciting a smile from Aubrey, who was feeling happy, thanks to his favorite son who continuously provided the answers he was expecting from a son who he thought was a perfect candidate for the role of inheriting his position after him. With the words now out of his son's mouth, these words soon reached the representative's ear, who at once knew what George clearly meant. Their private military contractors, mercenary, PMCs would be making their moves very soon as they start heading to Isperia. Among them were many prominent PMCs, such as Academy, formerly known as Blackwater, a private military company that provides security, training, and logistics services for the family. DynCorp International, a company which offers services, including aviation support, intelligence, security, and logistics for the family. G4S, although based in the United Kingdom, provides security and risk management services worldwide for the family. And many more that were about to head to and be stationed in Isperia, acting as their counterpart against the Rothschilds, or so they thought. While the Morgans were preparing for an imaginary third round of their battle in the 21st century with Eden, due to their single misunderstanding of collaborating Rena's visit to Eden, and had used her family's influence to help the country by making America turn the aircraft carrier that would have otherwise caused quite a few troubles for them. At the same time, the FBI finally deemed themselves to be prepared enough for making their move. They used the ongoing war between Eden and Isperia to be the reason for Aaron to try to escape and return to America for his safety, so they had to make an urgent move before that happens, as Aaron could be a powerful obstacle if they delayed it for too long. A convoy of 5 cars, 3 of them being from the police and 2 having the logo of an energy utility service provider, parked in front of Aaron's house. A group of people started coming out of the cars, with police officers armed with weapons and bulletproof vests. As for the company workers, they walked at the center of the parallel, making their way towards the house, which could now be seen to be bustling with movements as all the guards guarding the house started positioning their hands on their waists, indicating that if those in police uniforms tried to do anything funny, this place would turn into a war scene. "What brings you here?" Donald asked as he walked out of the small fence around the house, already wearing a bulletproof vest and other radio equipment. "We are here under the judge's approval to cordon the house for containing a machine that is deemed to be dangerous for the neighbors and the grid," answered one of the workers as he handed Donald the paperwork detailing the judge's order. Donald received the piece of document and started reading it. At the same time, he had already informed Aaron and his lawyers. However, even before the lawyers could respond, Aaron had responded and ordered for Donald to not cause problems for them and allow them to enter the house, but before that, they should evacuate his family first. "You can enter the building, but before that, we have to evacuate our clients," Donald said. Right away, someone was about to disagree under the worry that they might be hiding something, but Donald continued with his statements. "A few male and female police officers can come with us as the clients pack their things and evacuate the premises, since the judge's order says that they have to evacuate the building until you find the cause for the problem anyway." Sure, they accepted, and some of the workers released a few sighs of relief. They had anticipated that the situation would go in a completely different direction, hence the massive armed police presence they had brought with them, but it seems that the owner of the house cared more about his family than whatever dangerous thing might be inside, or the dangerous thing inside had already been moved. Meanwhile, the residents living in the neighboring houses all seemed to have been attracted by the commotion as they immediately left their houses and gathered at the place where this drama was taking place, surrounding it a small distance away from it as they watched everything taking place in silence, or sometimes discussing between each other about the situation while pointing at the police who were on the door. After a few minutes of supervised packing, the family left the building with a few guards who were heading directly to Henry's school to pick him up, as per Aaron's orders. At the same time, the house also had its perimeter wrapped around with yellow tape as the police started guarding the building together with the guards who were ordered to keep an eye on the ongoing situation until the lawyers arrived to assess if any law had been broken during the process and decide their approach to revoking the occupation of the property of their client. The onlookers in the surrounding area started dispersing, but there remained a few groups of neighbors who continued talking about the ongoing situation, But not for a long time before they too left to tend to their own work, which they had momentarily put on hold to witness the police raid. I really expected them to give us more trouble than simply packing and complying with the warrant," Peter Strzok reported to Lisa Page about the success of their plan using his phone. "I don't think it's going to be that easy from now on. The army of lawyers will soon be arriving to scrutinize whatever you are doing at the moment before they start the process of revoking access to the building by appealing the warrant," Lisa cautioned, trying to remind the team leader that everything was not over until they had secured what they had come for. "I know. My team is now collecting the data from his private server and in the process of dismantling the electrical connections before we start the process of moving the machine back to the HQ," said Peter, showing that he wasn't letting the plan's success get to his head. He turned and smiled, looking at the guard whose job was to make sure that they weren't doing anything shady, but at the moment the guard was doing nothing of that sort even after seeing that they were collecting data to the network-attached storage NAS they had brought with them. "Having access to information is really convenient," he said to Lisa, who on the other side of the phone understood what he meant by that statement. The team had thoroughly investigated all of the people who were working at the house, providing security and maintenance of the surrounding. However, they found out that the people Aaron hired were only for the security and nothing else. The chores inside the house weren't done by anyone else, as the people living there handled it themselves, as they felt more comfortable that way. Leveraging their access to abundant information they had collected about the guards working at the house and identifying their soft spots and weaknesses just in case they were ordered to oversee all of their steps. Unfortunately, they did exactly that, but now thanks to them being prepared for it, the team threatened the guard using his family and a few more of his secrets, ultimately convincing him to now be working for them in return for payment. This meant that they weren't the only ones getting something out of him, since he was also getting money and was not working for them just because of threats and with no compensation. Now, thanks to that guard's assistance, they had managed to gain uninterrupted access to the security services logged information, which detailed every journey the family had taken in the previous months, as well as the details of who visited the compound and much more. With this information, the team could piece out the destinations the whole family had visited since day one of their jobs, allowing them to later be able to correlate events occurring at certain places with their logged information, which was always accurate since the guards were always present with them during those visits. Their actions were all marching in the same directions the Morgans had been taking themselves to, successfully attracting Aaron's attention towards them. Something that many people in the future would be afraid of doing, thanks to these two being the pathfinders of demonstrations of what would happen to those who dared try to do anything like this. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, Sunday, an RQ-4 Global Hawk reconnaissance drone could be seen cutting through the skies, flying at the maximum speed it can safely reach without causing any damage to itself, heading towards the direction where only two countries are situated, Eden and Esperia. It was on its fourth hour of flight for this mission, having taken off from a land base in America due to its inability to take off from an aircraft carrier. Nevertheless, because of its long-range endurance capabilities, that was sufficient enough for allowing it to go and collect intel while returning without having to worry about the risk of falling out of the sky, since it could handle a mission that could last for more than 36 hours. Not too far from it, there was an aircraft carrier that was acting as the commanding base of this mission. An E-2 Hawkeye, a squadron of fighter jets and an airborne early warning and control (AEW&C) aircraft took off from the aircraft carrier with the assistance of the steam catapult. It too was starting its mission to act as an early warning system for the Global Hawk, with the squadron acting as the guard for the E-2 that was keeping an eye on the reconnaissance aircraft just in case anyone in the targeted location discovered it and did anything that might pose any threat to the aircraft. The mission had started very well, and many people acting as the team members of the mission hoped that the mission would conclude well without any problems. "Sir, the booking of the private plane has already been completed and your family should be in the air in a matter of half an hour. However, since they don't have visas to come here, you will need to have someone from the migration department grant them entrance to the country," Nova reported to Aaron, who was reading the report he received from the Ares members who had been observing the whole raid by the FBI, who were acting as if they were employees from the utility company. "Good. I will be personally welcoming them at the local airport. Inform Alexander about it," Aaron instructed, to which Nova immediately complied by sending the message to Alexander's glasses, who responded without any delay, assuring them that they can consider it done. He gave us the approval and will be sending us the official documents soon, Nova informed Aaron about the successful arrangements. Good. How many hours until the graduation ceremony? Aaron inquired after he remembered that today was Sunday and it also marked as the final day for the soldiers in training to graduate. You still have a few more hours, while they still have a few more days to fight in the war before they are able to receive their final evaluation. I will inform you when you are required to log in to attend it, Nova added, receiving a nod of understanding from Aaron. His eyes raised in some astonishment as he continued reading the document that held information about Esperia's recent movements, which had been quite erratic since Eden's press conference, to which Esperia responded with one of their own. However, since they didn't have any counter-evidence, it ended up only being a press conference that was full of accusations with not a single piece of evidence to back them. But at the same time, they also hinted about Eden doing something weird and mysterious activity on the island that had been covered with brown clouds for a few months and was trying to divert the attention of some people away from them, putting pressure on Eden to do something big that would return these people's attention back to their fight once again if whatever they were doing there was indeed a super secret. The silence in the room continued for a few more hours until Nova reminded Aaron that he should start preparing himself for the graduation ceremony of the trainees. Aaron said nothing and simply closed his eyes, after which, Nova immediately logged him into the VR where he found himself already donning the uniform of the commander of the army, which he liked quite a lot since it made him look imposing and commanding. He was then teleported into a convoy that stood right at the entrance of the graduation compound, which was filled with an eerily silence, as if there was no one. The convoy then gradually made its way as it entered the silent stadium where rows and rows of soldiers were arranged in groups of 40 by 40, who stood motionlessly like statues, only their eyes moving as they watched the convoy come to stop right after the entrance before all the cars in front and behind the generals left, leaving only the general's car, which immediately opened its sunroof, allowing Aaron to rise and stand through that opening. This immediately resulted in all the 40,000 soldiers adorned in ceremonial uniforms saluting at him in unison as if they were being automatically controlled, but they were not. In fact, this was a result of the training they had received throughout these 3.5 months that they had spent here. And thanks to that, they felt respect and adoration towards the general that was now ingrained from the very depth of their subconscious. Aaron returned the salute, and by the time he put his hands down, he felt a sense of pride rising from the depth of his heart. He felt the worry of the safety of this place would also be soon removed from his heart, as in the upcoming days, Eden was going to become the safest country in the world. As he did so, the soldiers also lowered their salutes and returned to the attention position. The announcer or the controller or the MC of the event, who at this time was Athena, was present in her physical body, while also being donned in ceremonial military attire that perfectly complemented her beauty. She announced the commencement of the troop inspection, which was immediately followed by the start of the general's car as it drove a few meters away from the soldiers, who remained still as statues, turning only their heads to maintain their eyes on the general as he passed in front of them with the military songs playing in the background, a result of the military band's hard work. This process took more than half an hour, as Aaron needed to pass in front of more than 40,000 soldiers, who for the whole time didn't even shake or move, earning Aaron satisfaction due to their remarkable discipline and composure throughout this time. The inspection was soon followed by Aaron giving a speech to the soldiers, which was pretty emotional for the soldiers, acknowledging their hard work and dedication. After this, they finally received the results of their hard work. Those who were appointed to different commanding positions were called forward to receive their appointment documents. Along with that, all the soldiers were also shown a hologram that displayed their appointed position and the points they had gained throughout their training. If they wanted any more details of their performances and why they had earned those points, they could access them later when they were handed the VR glasses after their graduation ceremony, after they had left the simulation pod and received their uniforms and other equipment tailored according to their own specializations. The ceremony continued with a flyby of the fighter jets, which the soldiers had fought alongside for a very long time as they endured the challenges together, instilling a bond between the soldiers and their military equipment. The newly graduated soldiers who had completed their training received their appointments and got off the pods and had already cleaned themselves and had already taken their places in their allotted rooms for having a rest. where they would be spending a week recuperating there, and the time would be even longer for those who would be responsible for doing security duty on the island, similar to how it had been done by the previous Ares members, who will be soon replaced by these already trained and high-level point achievers, taking their place since they will be going to take their training. But among these graduates, there were a few among them who were called by Athena before they could start resting due to the emergence of some urgent matter. Whom! A beastly roar could be heard as it echoed through one of the empty roads that were usually busy with trucks passing back and forth, carrying containers in tandem with the rail network. However, at this moment this usually heavily busy road was completely empty. 4 Su-35s could be seen already powered on as the pilots were urgently making their way to them, donning specialized pilot gears which didn't have any resemblance to any of the existing gears seen before. The maintenance teams were doing their final system checks on the planes, like removing the red hanging tags on the missiles that were attached to the hard points of the planes. The urgency of the situation could be seen due to their professional movements. These aircrafts looked brand new, as if they had come out of the factory just a few minutes ago, because in fact, it was true that they were indeed made just a few moments ago. While these planes outwardly resembled Su-35s, the only difference between these planes which resembled other Su-35 was that the structure and all their internal components of these planes were entirely different and were made by utilizing a special material that was the result of continuous breakthroughs in the lab city. Though the data as to how these planes appeared could be found online, Nova had still opted to ask Athena to send one of the 2 flight-ready, 4th-gen flights that the previous military had to the island. There, the plane was immediately sent to the printer for it to be thoroughly scanned, to have all the dimensions measured accurately, and by using that acquired information, new aircrafts that looked like the Su-35 were built. However, these new aircrafts didn't have anything similar to them other than their outside appearance, with everything inside comprised of the latest tech, resulting in these fighter jets being able to go toe-to-toe with even the most advanced aircraft the current world could offer, while at the same time, not attracting attention and suspicions as to how they were able to manage to research and build brand new fighter in a matter of few months. The pilots boarded the planes using the ladder integrated into them and soon took their seats. This was followed by them putting on the seat belts before they started conducting their pre-flight checks of all the moving parts on the plane. The flight control surfaces responded crisply to their inputs, and the displays in the cockpit blinked to life, showing the vital flight data before it was immediately transferred to the headgear they were wearing, subtracting any need for them to have a look at the displays on the cockpit unless a malfunction on the headgear occurred. Ground, this is Angel 1-1. All systems are green, I'm ready to take off. James, the pilot of the first Su-35-looking aircraft and also the team leader of the mission, reported. This is Angel 1-2. This is Angel 1-3. This is Angel 1-4. The other 3 pilots also shortly reported to confirm of having finished their system checks, with all the systems being green. When James heard the clearance from all 3 other pilots having reported their green systems and ready for takeoff, he smiled, feeling happy that their very first mission had started without facing any problems. Angel Squadron, this is Square Tower, you are cleared for takeoff. A response shortly came, allowing them to proceed with takeoff. With them receiving the clearance to take off, they wasted no time as James pushed the throttle on his left hand, increasing the amount of thrust coming from the engine, and slowly releasing the pressure from the brakes. The airplane started moving slowly, gradually gaining speed before he slowly started raising the front wheel, which was shortly followed by the rear wheel, leaving the ground, officially marking the takeoff of the first Eden-made plane in real life, and this was not for a test but for an official mission. Closely behind him, the other 3 jets also had taken off within a few seconds of intervals, which was soon followed by them joining each other, flying side by side. The moment they rejoined each other side by side, James radioed in, Square Tower, this is Angel Squadron. Requesting clearance for Mission Vector. Angel Squadron, you are clear for Mission Vector. Godspeed, came the response from the tower. The squadron leader acknowledged the clearance and made a slight adjustment to the target they were heading to, the other 3 Su-35 following his lead seamlessly. Angel Squadron, this is the Air Operations Center. Intercept an unauthorized drone entering Eden's airspace. Escort it back to the international waters immediately, came a tense communication the moment they started their mission vector. Angel 1-1, roger that. "We'll intercept the intruder and redirect it," James responded, his voice reflecting his brimming confidence. In the vastness of the open sky, the Angel Squadron executed a series of precise maneuvers, each pilot seamlessly the moves of the other without having the need for any word to be spoken. Their training had forged an unspoken language of communication between them, a bond that transcended any verbal communication. The jets cut the sky in full speed and were heading to the country's northern border as if there was no tomorrow. They were doing so to intercept the RQ-4 Global Hawk reconnaissance drone that was on the verge of entering their border in about half an hour. During their flight, they maintained their high Mach 3 speed, resulting in most of their flight path to avoid populated areas in the worry of breaking windows in those areas. At the same time, they weren't trying to hide themselves or anything since the world was already aware that they had 4 Su-35 planes, but the surprising fact was that all 4 of them were in the air at the same time, something that had never been seen in the history of the country. This meant that all the stealth options that were present in these new aircrafts were disabled for this specific mission, with the only active one being a signal releaser, whose job was to make the plane have the same radar cross-section that of any normal Su-35, hiding the actual radar cross-section of this plane that could send the Raptors to therapy. "Target sighted at 12 o'clock, called out James. "Angel 2, 3 and 4, confirm visuals," James instructed. "Confirmed," echoed his wingman. In a matter of a few minutes, the squadron had already reached their border, and after reaching, they noticed the foreign aircraft, thanks to their advanced avionics. Following the response, James gave the order and they immediately started executing the interception maneuver. 2 aircraft patrolled in the area just in case any other aircraft appeared, while the remaining 2 aircrafts went to intercept. One of them positioned itself on the starboard side of the RQ-4 Global Hawk drone and the other one stayed at the rear of it at a slight distance, prepared for taking the action in case the drone ignored the warning. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Angel 11 of Eden's Air Force. You are approaching restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately," James called out over the radio. But the intruder remained silent even after he radioed in. "Angel 11 to the unidentified aircraft, identify yourself immediately," John called over the radio once again after the awkward silence they had received after his first warning. "Angel 11 to the unidentified aircraft, identify yourself immediately," John said for the 3rd time, but like the previous 2 attempts, they received no response as the drone continued to approach closer and closer to the border. "BRRTTTTTTTTTTTTT." Suddenly, a sound was heard as bullets passed at the port side of the drone, resulting in it moving to the starboard side, forcing the Angel 12 to make an aggressive pull to the right to avoid collision with the drone. "Angel 11 to the unidentified aircraft, this is your final warning. Turn back immediately to avoid any hostile actions," James commanded firmly. At the same time, he initiated a lock on the drone which had leveled once again after the aggressive maneuver. At the same time as James initiated the lock on the Global Hawk, the 2 patrolling aircrafts immediately in a sync did a 180-degree in such a short span of time that their suit had to get to work to reduce the extreme amount of G-forces the pilots experienced. The force had reached 15 Gs which their enhanced bodies were able to handle, however, the suits dampened most of it, leaving them to experience 10 Gs. If the frame of these planes had been made from the same materials as the original Su-35s, with these maneuvers they would have bent and crunched on themselves. With the powerful engines capable of supporting such aggressive maneuvers, the 2 pilots headed in a single direction as a squadron of 4 Fa-18 Hornets was approaching them at full speed. The Su-35's afterburners were engaged, marking the first time they had ever been engaged since the time they had been supercruising in Mach 3 without them, thanks to the powerful engines. "Angel 13 to the approaching unidentified aircraft squadron, this is Eden's Air Force. You are approaching our airspace. Turn on your transponders and identify yourselves immediately, or you will be shot at once," Angel 13 announced through a universal radio frequency, making sure that the approaching aircraft was able to hear his announcement. "Angel 13, this is Falcon 11 of the USS Freedom. We are conducting signal recovery for our drone that has lost signal during a training exercise. Do you have any information about it?" A response came from the approaching aircraft, followed by them immediately turning on their transponder as a demonstration of their sincerity. "Falcon 11, this is Angel 13. Roger that. We understand your situation. We have detected your Global Hawk on our radar, and 2 of our aircrafts are attempting to intercept it. I will act as the guide, follow closely behind me," came a response from Angel 1-3, who immediately turned the planes that only had visual confirmation between each other. Angel 1-4 continued heading to the approaching aircraft, passing each other from a safe distance before he turned the plane 180 degrees and started heading in the same direction as the American squadron that was following Angel 1-2, acting as an insurance in case the false reason the Americans gave them changed and they started dishing out at them. He was sure that they could win without causing any harm. When the American squadrons reached their Global Hawk, they pretended to try to recover the signal, and when they finally succeeded in doing so, the Global Hawk turned around and was immediately followed by the squadron as it started heading out of Eden's airspace. They then returned to the direction where the aircraft carrier of the Pacific Fleet was positioned, their mission having ended in failure due to the unexpected discovery and reaction from Eden's Air Force. "So, you're telling me they discovered, intercepted and almost shot down our drone, forcing us to pretend as if we had a signal problem to avoid further escalation?" Obama asked as he briefed immediately. His face and tone reflected his disbelief since he was having a hard time believing that Eden had developed to such a degree. "Did they secretly buy new aircrafts or something similar without our knowledge?" he asked sarcastically, finding it hard to believe the information that he had just received. "No, they didn't buy new aircraft. They simply refurbished the ones they had, meaning what we saw was the entire Eden's Air Force at work. However, after a few months of operation, they won't be able to maintain more than one of them in operational readiness due to lack of experienced mechanics working for them, and they don't have resources to train some new ones either," answered the Secretary of Defense, assuring that something like this is not going to happen again. "The same thing happened to Esperia when they thought they could win against them, and what do you think happened to them? What do you think will happen to us?" Obama asked sarcastically, getting pissed off by the man who seemed to be too overconfident in their military's power to not even consider the potential outcome of that. "No, Mr. President, my confidence stems from knowing the full capabilities of our military as the source of it, and no matter how they develop and how much faster they are able to get new equipments, they would never imagine of reaching our level at least for about a century," answered the Secretary of Defense, showing the source of his pride. "I don't care about that. Now it seems that they have something secret enough to hide to even risk shooting down an American drone. If push comes to shove, I want to know what they are really hiding on that island and what is important enough to warrant such actions from them," Obama asserted, as his senses were urging him that they need to understand what was happening there as soon as possible or they were going to regret it in the future.